The story begins with a man named Rick getting beaten up, thinking he's going to die, but we learn he's actually being trained, and his seniors tell him that he's ready for his exam. We see adventurers at the guild, registering for the E-rank exam, as the receptionist Elisa guides them, but when it's Rick's turn, she recognizes him, because they used to work together, before he quit to become an adventurer. We see that he's nervous, because he's already in his 30s, and people usually become F-rank adventurers in their teens, and then advance to E-rank within 2 years. Elisa wonders what he's been up to for the last 2 years, so he mentions he trained in the mountains, but a drunk man suddenly appears, and starts hitting on Elisa. Rick tries to calm him down, holding him back, but the man suddenly passes out, so he thinks the man must have just had too much to drink. He gets his exam ticket, but is shocked to see an unlucky number, so he becomes more worried, but he heads out, and meets with one of his seniors named Renette. Meanwhile, the people inside notice a handprint on the drunk man's armor, recognizing him as a former A-ranked adventurer, and they wonder what happened to him, as Elisa realizes that Rick knocked him out. Rick's physical assessment begins, and everyone's surprised to hear that he's taking the exam at 32. After that, all the candidates are told to line up, and place their hands on a crystal ball, and based on the light emitted by the crystal, their mana will be measured. The examinees start putting their hands, and get to know their mana level, but when Rick places his hand on it, his mana is revealed to be at F-, which is the lowest among all the examinees, so everybody laughs at him, but the ball breaks after he leaves. In their next test, they're told to attack a slime bag as hard as they can, to determine their offensive ability. Seeing the slime bag, Rick remembers his training with his master Broston, who tells him that his body's strength is the most important thing, regardless of what weapon he uses, giving him the task of destroying a golden slime bag. Rick knows that a golden slime is as hard as a dragon's fang, so he thinks it's impossible to break it with his fist, but Broston says it's the minimum strength needed for an adventurer, revealing that he can destroy 200 of them at once, and he makes Rick start by punching the bag 50,000 times. The test begins, and an overconfident boy named Fried steps forward, as we learn that even though he's only 11, his magic power is as strong as a C-ranker's. Fried chants his spell, and he unleashes his 3rd level pyro magic on the slime, which seems to be weak, but the judges are impressed, calling him a genius. Rick is surprised by how small it was, remembering the kind of pyro magic his other senpai would attack him with. He thinks Fried must have condensed his attack's impact into a small flame to fit the indoor environment, so he thinks he must be a prodigy. The other examinees continue with the test, and when it's Rick's turn, the examiner tells him it would be better if he gave up, since he's too old to start as an adventurer. But he thinks his age doesn't matter, remembering how hard he trained over the last 2 years, and he smashes the bag, completely destroying it. Everyone's shocked seeing this, and Fried can't believe Rick stole his spotlight, but he thinks it's okay, since defense magic is his specialty, planning to show Rick his place in the next test. But Rick shocks everyone again, as he defends against the examiner's 4th level spell. The examiner prepares to use a 5th level spell, telling Rick to use a stronger defense magic, but Rick notes that he's only able to use 1st level spells, but he's confident in his abilities. So the examiner decides not to hold back, unleashing a powerful 5th level cyclone attack, and it even destroys the barrier around them. Meanwhile, the top-ranked Royal Knight, Sylvester Urselnia, notices the shockwaves from a distance, and rushes to the exam center, where an examiner tells him about Rick, and we see that he was able to block the attack. Sylvester can't believe Rick is 32, and was just a receptionist at the guild until 2 years ago. Rick takes a written test next, and he meets up with Renette afterward. She wonders how his exam went, and he's confident he'll score 100 in the written exam, but he isn't sure about the practical assessments. Fried suddenly appears, and Rick can't remember his name, so he's annoyed, and accuses Rick of stealing his chance to shine during the exam. Rick tries to calm him down, but Fried's sister Angelica shows up, and challenges Rick to a duel, throwing her glove at him, because he made her brother cry. He picks it up, saying that laundry isn't easy, but Renette tells him that picking up the opponent's glove means accepting the challenge. They head to the arena, and we learn that Angelica is a 2nd-class Royal Knight, as she declares that the loser of the duel will become the winner's servant for life. Renette mentions that a 2nd-class Royal Knight is around rank B, so Rick becomes nervous, knowing she can defeat high-level monsters on her own. He freaks out since he's only F-ranked, thinking he's going to die, but Renette tells him to remember his training, so he recalls how much he's suffered, and instantly throws up. She tells him to have confidence in himself, since he's a member of their party, the Orichalcum Fist, the strongest party on the continent, so he manages to regain his composure. They prepare to fight, and Angelica mentions she will hold back so he doesn't die. She enhances her body with magic and dashes at him, but he manages to dodge the attack. Fried notes that his sister is known for her speed, and she uses her blink step to attack, but Rick easily dodges it, thinking she's too slow. Angelica can't believe he avoided it again, because only a handful of the first-class knights can react to her speed. She thinks he just got lucky, so she attacks again, but Rick can't believe how slow she is, wondering if she became a royal knight through nepotism, or if he's actually strong. He prepares to dodge, but Angelica trips on a rock, causing her to spin and swing rapidly, and he barely dodges the attack. He's impressed by her technique, and he thinks he was arrogant to believe he was stronger than her. Angelica pretends she did it on purpose, and prepares to attack with triple her speed, but Rick still finds it slow. She keeps on attacking, and he prepares to intercept her next attack, but she suddenly trips, and he misses his attack. When the dust clears, we see a huge hole in the ground, and Angelica realizes she would have died if she didn't trip over. She wonders who he is, so he mentions he's just a former receptionist who decided to become an adventurer. He's impressed by what a second-class knight can do, eager to learn more from her, but she instantly surrenders. Rick can't believe it, but she says she will give him the win as praise for avoiding her blink step. She starts to walk away, but Rick reminds her that according to their agreement, she must become his servant, but she quickly runs away. Rick thinks about his exam, wondering if he will pass, and Renette tells him that Broston and the others will be arriving soon. He wonders why they're coming, so she notes they want to see how he's doing, so he freaks out, knowing that nothing good can come from their visit. The next day, Elisa announces that the judges will send mana to their admission cards. She explains that if it glows red, the participant fails, and will need to try again next year, but if it turns blue, it means they have passed. Renette tells Rick to stop worrying, reminding him of his extremely tough training in the past 2 years, and it makes him feel a bit confident, but she mentions that if he fails, his training will be tripled. When mana is sent to Rick's card, it starts glowing, alternating between red and blue, so he becomes nervous, but it finally turns blue. So he leaves the hall with a smile, walking alongside Renette, but he suddenly smells a strong scent. A boy named Raster approaches Renette, and he introduces himself as the Duke of the Northern Kingdom. He starts flirting with her, saying he would like to make her his second wife, and Rick steps in, but Raster calls him an ugly old man. He explains that she's his girlfriend, which makes Raster laugh, and he can't believe a person as old as Rick is an F-rank adventurer. He mentions that Raster doesn't seem strong either, but he reveals that he's an A-rank adventurer, saying he was able to reach A-rank when he was 14. He explains that he's the examiner for the second stage of the exam, and he turns to Renette, inviting her to have dinner with him. But she tells him to back off, because she's Rick's girlfriend, and she mentions that his perfume is too strong for her liking, so he becomes upset, saying he's going to give Rick a hard time. After that, Fried and Angelica cling to Raster, as we learn he's their brother, and they tell him that Rick made fun of them, so he plans to get revenge for them. Rick arrives at the exam center, and he learns that the next test will be a mock battle. Renette advises him to hold back, but he thinks he'll need to give it his all, especially if Raster is his examiner. A man named Lynx appears, and he introduces himself as Rick's examiner, making him relieved. He mentions that he also became an adventurer late in life, saying it took him 20 years to reach rank B, and he tells Rick that he's a great motivation for middle-aged men who want to achieve their dreams. Lynx leaves, thinking Rick trained hard for the exam, but Raster suddenly appears, telling him they need to talk. After some time, the candidates are told that Lynx has fallen ill, so Raster will take over as their examiner. Rick and the other participants are worried, because Raster is known as the Man of 1,000 Spells, and his other nickname is the F-Rank Crusher. Rick realizes he's in trouble and considers running away, but he knows his seniors will triple his training if he doesn't succeed. Renette again comforts him, telling him she believes in him, but a kid in a hood suddenly approaches him and offers to tell him about his future. He sets up a crystal ball and tells Rick to take a seat, but Renette notices that there's a spell on the chair, and Rick disappears before she can do anything. so she becomes furious and she destroys the ball, revealing that the person was actually freed. She asks him where Rick was sent, threatening to destroy his eyes, so he reveals that he teleported Rick about 100 meters away near the beach. Meanwhile, Rick finds himself surrounded by people dressed in black, and one of them introduces the group, revealing that their task is to get rid of him. Rick realizes it's part of Raster's plan, and the man reveals that they're all above B rank, so he doesn't stand a chance against them. Rick's seniors suddenly appear, demanding to know what's going on, but Rick tells them the men are just helping him warm up before the exam. He warns them to run away if they value their lives, but one of them attacks Broston, and his blade shatters upon contact with his skin. Broston breaks the man's fist, but he instantly heals it, telling him to keep practicing. Rick's other senior named Miz tells him to stop worrying, and he pulls out his gun, blasting the men away with magical bullets. Another member of Rick's team named Alice is taken hostage by one of the men, who demands all of them to surrender their weapons. Rick tells him to let her go for his own good, but the man starts hurting her, so she becomes angry, and she blasts all of them away with her powers. The leader of the men realizes who they are, recognizing Alice as the strongest mage in the world, Miz as the greatest weapon craftsman, and Broston as a master of all types of support magic, and together they're the strongest party on the planet, the Orichalcum Fists. Alice deals with the remaining guards, while Rick runs back to the exam hall to find Renette. As he returns, Renette throws Freed away, but Lynx suddenly shows up, revealing that Raster forced him to step down as the examiner and locked him in a room. He urges Rick to leave the exam hall for his safety, but he stands up and heads to confront Raster. We see Raster tormenting the other trainees in the arena, while a man named Adolph watches him. He has a unique ability to see people's core stats, which are strength, dexterity, mana capacity, and magic control. A trainee with average stats gets defeated by Raster's lightning magic, and when Adolph checks his stats, he sees that Raster has an insane amount of mana. His eyes start hurting, because staring at someone powerful causes him pain, but he notices Rick entering the field. So he checks his stats, but Adolph is shocked to see that Rick has maxed out stats in every category except mana, and he starts rolling around from just looking at him. Meanwhile, Elisa meets Renette, and she introduces herself as Rick's former coworker, so Renette invites her to sit with them. Broston asks Renette what she thinks of Rick, and she believes he would easily pass the exam, but Elisa thinks otherwise, since Raster is known for crushing F-rankers with his superior magic. Before the mock battle, Raster praises Rick for escaping his guards, but tells him not to get overconfident. Rick wonders why Raster became an adventurer, and he reveals that he was born a genius, so he decided to become an A-ranker to gain prestige, but he plans on quitting since he's become bored. The fight finally begins, and Raster shoots an ice blast at Rick, but he doesn't move, and Raster thinks he must be scared. But we learn that he decided to follow Renette's advice to stay calm during the first minute of the battle, and to only attack after he observes his opponent completely. Raster unleashes his next attack, which creates a huge blast, but Rick doesn't even get a scratch. Elisa is surprised, and Broston tells her about Rick's intense training, where he was forced to wear 100 kilograms of ankle weights and run through a forest filled with demonic snakes. Raster attacks him relentlessly, but he remains calm, and Broston reveals that Miz was the magic trainer of Rick, while Renette was in charge of training his dexterity, and Elisa is surprised to hear this, since she thought Renette was just a maid. Broston mentions that Rick's power is equal to an S-ranked adventurer, but he's unaware of his own strength. Raster uses his earth magic to crush Rick, and he thinks the fight is over, but Rick manages to break free. So Raster becomes annoyed, and he tries to punch Rick, but he gets countered, and gets blown away. Raster can't understand how Rick is blocking his attacks, while Rick has observed him completely, and he realizes that despite his incredible mana, his lack of proper training makes his moves inefficient. Raster uses his fire magic, but Rick blocks it, and Miz tells Elisa that Rick only used 1% of his strength to block the attack. Raster rushes in with his blink step, but Rick counters it, thinking he's slow. Raster admits that Rick is skilled for an F-ranker, but he mentions he's not fighting properly because he's tired after defeating the other examinees, calling Rick lucky. So he becomes angry because Raster still doesn't acknowledge him, and he tells him about the insane training he went through, saying he put his life on the line to get stronger. Miss tells Elisa that Rick died multiple times during his training, but Broston revived him, saying he was able to overcome his physical limitations because he never gave up. Raster makes fun of him, wondering why he would go through such tough training, so he reveals that he wants to defeat the world's strongest monster, the Kaiser Elsapiet. Its name was written in the legend of Yamato the hero, and Broston reveals that defeating the monster is the ultimate goal of their party, but Raster thinks it isn't real. He binds Rick with his earth magic, and he creates a massive tree golem, threatening to kill Rick. But he uses a basic airshot spell that he has practiced over 100 million times, and he breaks free from the roots. Elisa is surprised to hear such a huge number, since it sounds impossible, but Broston explains that Rick achieved it by using special time and space magic. Raster uses his strongest spell to attack Rick, but he counters with his airshot, and he manages to overpower Raster's magic. The tree golem shatters, throwing Raster towards the benches, where he's knocked unconscious, and everyone in the arena is shocked that the strongest examiner was defeated by an F-rank adventurer. Rick meets with his party, and they congratulate him on passing the test, and he thanks them for their help. Raster shows up with his siblings, and Rick tells him he should just train one skill until it reaches its limits. But Raster thinks Rick is making fun of him, telling him he will be his examiner again for the promotion exam, and he promises to defeat him. Raster leaves with his siblings, but Angelica stops for a moment and bows to him, which makes Rick confused. Rick and Renette wait for the results, and when the names of the candidates are announced, Rick seems unusually calm. She wonders how he can be so relaxed when he was so nervous during the test earlier, but he mentions that he just remembered something important. We go back to when Rick was a child, and he reads about the hero Yamato, who dreams of defeating the Kaiser, so he can claim a treasure that can grant any wish. Rick is so inspired by the story that he starts dreaming of becoming an adventurer and shares his dream to his parents, but they don't support him. His father dismisses the story as a fairy tale, and his mother worries that becoming an adventurer is too dangerous, and both of them tell him to find a stable job instead. So he becomes disappointed. But one day, a doctor tells him he has a unique skill that hasn't been activated yet. He realizes that Yamato also had that rare skill, which makes him excited, thinking he has the potential to become a great adventurer. Rick spends his childhood waiting for his skill to activate, but as time passes, he becomes depressed because he sees no progress. His friends suggest he become an adventurer first, because even adventurers without special skills can make good money, but Rick mentions that he wants to fulfill his dream. Rick eventually gives up on waiting for the skill to activate, and he takes a job as a guild receptionist, making his parents happy. He works for 14 years, but finds no fulfillment in the job, and he keeps trying to activate his skill, but nothing works. Rick finally gives up on his dream, and puts away the book he used to read as a child. He works with Elisa, and carries on with his normal life, until one day, his friend Zaid shows up, and tells him he has become a B-rank adventurer, so Rick is surprised. He hides his jealousy, and congratulates Zaid, but that night, he gets drunk, and regrets giving up on his dream. He's lost in his thoughts when he hears people screaming, and a giant monster appears in front of him. Renette shows up, and walks towards the monster, but he blocks her, trying to protect her, not knowing how strong she is. She instantly cuts the monster into pieces, impressing Rick, and they both start walking together. When she introduces herself, he's shocked to learn that she's an S-rank adventurer, and he wonders if it's too late for him to pursue his dream, because he's already in his 30s. So she tells him that his age means his mana capacity can't be improved, and he will likely never make it as an adventurer, so he becomes sad, but he keeps smiling, and invites her to have dinner with him. She agrees to his invitation, which surprises him, because he thought she wouldn't accept his offer. Rick remains happy throughout the next day, but when he's on his way to have dinner with Renette, a group of monsters attack the city, ruining his plans. Renette tells him to leave it to her, and she unleashes her attack, cutting through all the monsters in an instant. But she senses the presence of a dragon, and her traumatic memories are triggered, making her unable to control her magic power. A massive dragon shows up, so everyone panics, and Zaid and the other adventurers try to fight it, but their attacks have no effect. Zaid realizes they can't fight such a powerful opponent, so he tells everyone to run, but the dragon surrounds them with a barrier, which prevents them from escaping. But Rick gathers all his courage and steps forward, declaring that he will face the dragon as an adventurer, even though he's terrified. The others try to stop him, but he mentions that he wants to die as an adventurer, which motivates them as well, and they attack the dragon, but it easily overpowers them. Rick refuses to give up, and he steps forward, but it crushes him to the ground, and everyone thinks he's dead, but it actually triggers his hidden skill that he's been waiting for his entire life. He suddenly gets up, lifting the dragon's foot with one hand, and mana overflows from his body. He's happy to see that his skill has finally activated, and he challenges the dragon to attack him. So it breathes fire at him, but Rick blocks it, and the dragon starts firing a laser, but he reflects the attack, and he's able to defeat the dragon, shocking everyone. His sudden transformation causes him to pass out, and when he wakes up, he finds Renette waiting for him. She reveals that he was unconscious for an entire week, and she invites him to join the Orichalcum Fist, saying their ultimate goal is to defeat the Kaiser. She believes in his determination to never give up, telling him he can still grow stronger and fight alongside them. She encourages him, saying he can still become an adventurer despite his age, and he starts crying, because it's the first time anyone has told him to pursue his dream. We see Lynx congratulating Rick on passing the test. He mentions that he's going to be released from the hospital soon, so he wants to have a drink with Rick, and he mentions that he also wants to meet Rick's friends. So we see Lynx heading into the mountains, as he wonders why Rick told him to wear his best armor. He follows the directions, but he's surprised when he reaches the Demon Lord's castle, wondering if he went the wrong way. But Rick opens the door and apologizes for making him come so far, but he's surprised there aren't any monsters there. Rick mentions that they don't come near the castle, making him wonder why he was asked to wear the equipment, so Rick explains that it's to prevent him from dying. Renette greets Lynx inside, and he sees Alice, which makes him hope his daughter grows up to be just as strong, but she suddenly fires lightning at him, and as it's about to hit him, Rick deflects it, destroying the wall. He reminds her not to cast magic inside the castle, but she tells him they haven't played together, and Renette tells her they will deduct the repair costs from her food budget, so she apologizes for her actions. But Rick decides to spend time with her, because he knows she will do it again if he doesn't play with her. Renette takes Lynx to his room, where he sees Miz from the window, and he goes to meet him. He's interested in the rocket launcher Miz is holding, so he allows him to test it, and as he fires the rocket, he's shocked by its power, which makes him think that if it was mass-produced, it would completely change how wars are fought. As Lynx walks around the castle, he comes across Broston, and he's impressed by the amount of books he has. Broston mentions it's his private library, saying he feels calm when he's surrounded by books, which makes Lynx wonder if he's also part of the party, since he seems more intelligent. He asks Broston if he has read all of the books, but he explains that he hasn't, because he's been busy helping Rick with his training. Lynx asks to learn from him as well, and Broston accepts his request, because he thinks Lynx has the same eyes as Rick. As they start their training, Lynx falls off a cliff because of the weights that Broston tied to him, and he thinks he's going to die, but he survives the fall, as he lands on a beast that Renette killed for their dinner. She realizes he's being trained by Broston, and he thanks her for saving his life, but Broston drags him back to continue their training. After they return to the castle, Lynx tells Rick he thought they were just going for a light training session, but Rick tells him he shouldn't believe what everyone says. Alice also wants to play with him, and Rick mentions that he will turn to ashes if he goes with her, but Miz thinks it's Rick's fault for inviting him. Renette gives them tea, and after she leaves, Lynx asks Rick how far he has gone with her, but he explains that they don't have that kind of relationship. He thinks they can't be together since he's in his 30s, but Lynx tells him that age is just a number, and he reveals that he and his wife have a 20-year age gap, which surprises Rick. At night, we see everyone having dinner, as Lynx tells Rick to help Renette with the chores, saying it's his opportunity to get close to her. So he leaves to help her, and Lynx mentions he wants to see Rick's special skill, but Broston explains that the skill only activates under certain conditions, and Rick has no control over it. He mentions that Rick is already as powerful as an S-rank adventurer, but if his skill is activated, he will become even stronger than all of them. After that, they tell Lynx their mission is to defeat the Kaiser, asking him if he knows about the 6 magical stones that open the door to the Source Spiral, where the Kaiser lives. They know that the 6 jewels are about to activate, because it happens every 200 years, so they think the jewels should be giving out large amounts of magic, and Lynx tells them he will see if he can find anything. Rick asks him for advice on how to get close to Renette, saying he couldn't find anything to help her with since she's good at everything, but Lynx just laughs at him. The next day, Rick and the others go to the guild to accept a quest, but Broston is confused when the guild master mentions that they can't take it on. Rick realizes that to do the quest, a party of 4 is required with 2 A-rank members, and Broston tells the guild master to get them someone who can help them. So he tells a girl named Ray to go with them, because she wanted to go on a quest with a high danger level. As they start their mission, Ray wonders if they're looking for something, and Rick tells her they're trying to find a magic stone, which makes her wonder if they can sell it for a high price. But Rick tells her they need to handle it with proper precautions, because it can attract monsters, but she assures him she can take care of them. She asks him about his rank, and when he tells her he's F rank, she thinks he just started out late, and she doesn't want to be like him. Back at the castle, Renette wonders if everyone will be alright, but Miz thinks nothing is going to happen to them, since Broston is with them. Miz uses his new invention to pump air into her skirt so he can lift it up, but she catches onto him and destroys the machine. Meanwhile, Rick and the others come across a wyvern, and Ray is afraid that it's going to call for help, but she's shocked when Broston punches it away. She tells him he's going to get them killed, because more wyverns are going to come, and he explains that he didn't kill it, but she's unable to understand his plan. Rick takes her away, and she keeps talking about the wyverns, but she's shocked when one of them crashes nearby. She realizes that Broston and Alice are destroying all the wyverns, but a red one suddenly appears in front of her. She mentions that even an A-rank adventurer will struggle to defeat it, so they should run away, but Rick says he needs to check something, and he tells her to escape, but she decides to fight by his side. She starts casting her spell, but she's shocked when he punches the wyvern, blowing off its head. The next day, Ray talks with the guild master about how Rick and the others took a wyvern corpse with them to eat. He thinks that after being with them, she would have come to her senses about fighting monsters, but she's even more motivated to become stronger. Meanwhile, Rick and the others find one of the magic jewels, and after Miz uses his magic, a map appears, and it reveals that the next jewel is in Heratopia. We learn that 400 years ago, the 4th King Alexander Heratopia built a coliseum in the town of Knuckle Percy. Tournaments were held in it, and he only used his fists to fight, but he reigned as the champion with a winning streak of 10,000. Rick and the others reach Heratopia, and seeing Alexander's statue makes Broston wish he could fight him, but Rick thinks it would destroy the entire country if that happened. They try to get information on the 6 jewels, but everyone runs away because they're scared of their appearance. Rick proposes going to the town hall, but before they leave, they see a girl named Militia being harassed. Broston tries to scare the man named Gold, but he doesn't run away, and mentions that he's a fighter. But Broston thinks he looks weak, so he becomes angry, and they go to the alley to fight, but he's instantly defeated. After that, Broston shows them the magic jewel, and asks them if they have seen any other crystal like it. Gold and Militia mention that they have seen it before, but she doesn't remember where, so Broston requests her to try and remember. They're interrupted by an announcement parade for the Fist King tournament, and Gold mentions that a man named Keldon Erwolf is on a 3-year winning streak. Gold and Militia point to his championship belt, and Rick is shocked because it has one of the magic jewels attached to it. After the parade, Keldon goes to a gym, where an old man apologizes to him for making him do the parade, but he explains that it's okay, because it's a fighter's job to make sure people enjoy the tournament. The old man wonders how he's feeling, and he mentions that he's fine, saying he might feel better if he comes across someone strong. Rick and the others suddenly arrive at the gym, and the old man thinks they're fans, so Rick tells him they're adventurers, but before he can explain their motive, Broston tells Keldon to hand over the belt. He mentions that the jewel used to belong to their old party member, and they have been looking for it. The old man is fed up with their stories, and he's about to throw them out, but Keldon interrupts him, thinking Broston is telling the truth. But he explains that he still isn't going to give him the belt, because it's important to the people of Heratopia. So the only way to get it is by reaching the top of the Fist King tournament, and seeing that he has no other method of getting it, Broston leaves the gym. The old man thinks Keldon shouldn't have let them go, but he thinks if they fought, everyone in the gym would be dead. He knows that all of them are strong, but he thinks Broston is the real deal, so he's excited to face him. Broston tells Rick and Renette they need to enter the tournament, and we learn that they need to pass the qualifiers held in the east and west parts of the city to participate. They then need to win a league consisting of people who pass the qualifiers. and the last man standing can participate in the tournament. Broston tells Rick to participate in the West League, while he will be taking part in the East, but Rick is worried about Broston because he's going to be alone. But he tells them they shouldn't worry about him since he hired Gold as his guide. After that, Renette tells Rick he needs to pass a test to participate in the qualifiers, and as he goes to take the test, a man tells him he needs to take part in a mock battle. He wonders if his opponent is strong, so the man tells him that the person he's going to fight has won all of her qualifying matches. But the man mentions that it doesn't matter if he loses, because he will still advance if his ability meets the standard. Angelica suddenly appears, and she's shocked to see that Rick is her opponent. He wonders if Raster is with her, but she reveals that she came alone, and she knows she's no match for him since he defeated her brother. As the match begins, she decides to attack with full power, but she suddenly falls down. She gets back up and prepares to attack, but she falls down once again, and Rick reveals that he's using a new technique on her, where he keeps sweeping his opponent's legs until they surrender. But she refuses to give up, and is about to attack again, but he keeps knocking her over. She tells him she will never surrender, so he's impressed by her determination, and he thinks he can fight her seriously, but as he's about to attack, she suddenly gives up. After that, Angelica meets with Rick and starts to cry, so he takes her to Melish's restaurant. She wonders why he came to Heratopia, and he explains it's because he wants to participate in the Fist King tournament. She reveals she became a fighter 4 months ago, and she also needs to get to the tournament no matter what. She thinks it's impossible for Rick to enter the tournament because a person needs to win 40 matches within 6 months, and she thinks he can't do it since only 1 week is left, but Renette notes that they have already registered for 40 matches in the next 4 days. Rick goes for his first fight, where the receptionist mentions his opponent is a man named Grit Albert. There are rumors that he uses illegal weapons during the match, but they did a body check and couldn't find anything. As the match begins, Grit takes out an impact stone from the sole of his shoes, and he punches Rick, thinking he has won the fight, but he's shocked when he realizes he broke his hand. Rick tells him to train more if he wants to use the full potential of the stone, and he attacks using a technique where he misses the punch, but the shockwave from it knocks out the opponent. Angelica also wins her match easily, as she kicks her opponent and sends him flying into the wall. After that, Renette and Rick congratulate her since she has won 40 matches, which means she has passed the qualifiers. Angelica tells Rick he can only participate in 1 match per venue in a day, and even though there are a lot of venues around the country, they're pretty far apart, so it isn't possible for him to fight in 10 matches. Angelica mentions that his next fight is 30 kilometers away, so even if he takes a carriage, he won't reach it in time, but he tells her he's in a hurry, so he's just going to run there. After he leaves, Renette wonders if Angelica wants to see his matches, so she explains that she does, but she thinks it isn't possible, so Renette tells her she will help her. She grabs Angelica and starts to jump from one roof to the next, which scares her, but Renette tells her it's the only way for them to get there on time. After 4 days, Angelica can't believe Rick actually won 40 matches, and she's glad he isn't in her block. Renette wonders if Angelica plans to win the league, but she knows it isn't possible because Rick is also participating. Renette mentions that Broston will also take part in the league, so she becomes even more depressed. She wonders if Renette doesn't get fed up with always accompanying Rick, and she thinks people might start to wonder if they're lovers, but Renette doesn't care since she actually has feelings for him. They are suddenly interrupted by a man, and he begs them to help him since he doesn't have enough workers. Meanwhile, Rick is approached by a man named Snape, who's the chairman of the committee that manages the West League. Rick wonders how he knows him, so Snape mentions he heard of Rick because he's the fastest person to ever qualify from the West League. A man tells Snape that Angelica isn't there, and Rick wonders if he knows her, so he explains that they're close. Rick asks him how long it's been since he gave up being a fighter, which surprises him, wondering how Rick found out he was a fighter. So Rick explains that after shaking his hand, he could tell Snape was a trained fighter. Snape reveals he won a small tournament 20 years ago, but he retired at the age of 23, so that tournament was his only victory. Snape mentions that his company will also send a participant to the tournament, and before he leaves, he wants Rick to tell Angelica she shouldn't play around too much. Rick goes to Melish's restaurant, and she tells him to be careful, because even though Snape looks like a gentleman, there are rumors he's connected to the underworld. She mentions that his company is the sponsor of the tournament, so they can send a participant because they have a free slot. Meanwhile, Angelica and Renette are wearing bunny suits, and they try to get people to bet on the Fist King tournament. Another bunny girl praises Angelica for her energy, and she says she didn't accept the job because she likes it, but Renette mentions that she was the one who accepted the offer. A drunk man starts to harass the bunny girls, and when he approaches Angelica, she and Renette beat him to a pulp. Rick arrives there, and is surprised to see what Angelica is wearing, but he's left speechless when he sees Renette. At the gym, Kelvin and the old man are impressed by Broston, who managed to clear the East League qualifiers in 2 days, and Kelvin is surprised that even Rick managed to do the same in 4 days. He's excited to fight them, and the look on his face makes the old man remember the time he recruited him to come to Heratopia. The next day, Angelica is angry with Rick for reacting so differently when he saw her in a bunny suit, so he and Renette tell her she also looked cute, but she's still mad. He mentions that he met Snape yesterday, which changes her mood, and she says she doesn't know who he is. The league that will determine who will enter the tournament begins, and the first match starts between Angelica and a girl named Helen. Angelica immediately goes on the offensive, but Helen dodges her attack, and as she tries to punch Angelica, she blocks it. Rick and Renette see that Angelica is straining herself, which isn't like her, but she still manages to win the match as she kicks Helen and sends her flying into a wall. Rick and Angelica continue to win their matches, and she has 4 matches left, but she needs to win all 4 to enter the tournament. As the next match begins, Angelica starts fighting a man named Taylor, and she attacks him with lightning. But it doesn't work, and he punches her, sending her flying into a wall, and he wins the match. After that, Rick tells Angelica it was clear her opponent had strong defenses, so he wonders why she kept using techniques that drained her stamina, but she leaves without answering. He keeps bothering her, so she tells him Snape is her fiancé, and he helped her family when they were in trouble. In a flashback to a year ago, her parents passed away, so she and her siblings had to take care of the family, but they fell into financial trouble, so their grandfather made a deal with Snape. He gave them support in return for Angelica being engaged to him, and they managed to resolve their financial issues, but it was too late to break the deal with Snape. Rick is shocked that Snape is her fiancé, and she's annoyed he didn't listen to her story. They suddenly see a man named Gaiath as he hurts a woman who accidentally ran into him, and Taylor steps up to him, but Gaiath slams him into the ground, defeating him in one blow. He starts to tear the girl's clothes, and Angelica tells him to stop, so he decides to attack her instead, but Rick stops him. Snape suddenly arrives, telling Gaiath to control himself until the tournament, so he decides to leave, and Rick is surprised when Snape mentions that Gaiath is his brother. After he leaves, Rick wonders if Snape sponsored the tournament because of his engagement with Angelica. So she explains that he has put a huge amount of money into the engagement, but his assets aren't enough, so he plans to earn a fortune from the tournament. Rick knows there are lots of bets on the tournament, and he realizes that Snape plans to fix the matches. Angelica thinks he will do it through his sponsor slot, and she plans to defeat his fighter so that he will call off the wedding. But his fighter will be Gaiath, and she knows she can't defeat him, so Rick offers to train her. As the training begins, Rick attaches weights to Angelica's body and ties her to himself, which confuses her, but he just reminds her to use strengthening magic, and he starts running. He explains that by pairing her with a fast person, her body will quickly adapt to faster movements. She tells him to give her a moment, but he mentions they will rest after 6 hours. He's surprised that she was able to survive the training, and he tells her he passed out the first time Renette trained him. Angelica is exhausted, but she's happy she survived the first day of training, but she's shocked when Rick tells her it was just the warm-up. On the 5th day of the training, Angelica runs away, and while she sits in a cafe, she thinks Rick won't know where she is, but he finds her in only 15 minutes. She thinks he will scold her for running away, but he understands why she did it, because during his training, he also thought about quitting. He even died several times, but Broston kept reviving him, and he told Rick to compare the regret he will feel if he gives up to the suffering he's currently facing, and this made him continue his training. She explains that ever since she was a child, she has been taught how to be a noble, but it doesn't suit her, and she wants to contribute to her family by being someone who can fight, so she decides to continue the training. Rick mentions that she's an excellent swordsman, but she knows that a fighter needs to fight with their hands. so he thinks she should use techniques that turn her hands into a sword, which is why he has called Renette to train her. Angelica's next match is against a man named Silva, and whoever wins will enter the tournament. Everyone thinks she's going to struggle, but as the match begins, she kicks him and she instantly wins the fight. But even though it's over, she keeps trying to fight because she thinks she's still in training. After that, Alice and Miz arrive, and Renette wonders if they found the magic jewels in the Empire, but he tells her the information was wrong. Broston also arrives, and as they're eating food, Rick praises Angelica for quickly learning from their training. She thinks there isn't enough time for her to learn everything, but Broston explains that even if she trains for a short period of time, her efforts will pay off. The tournament finally begins, and as the matchups are announced, Angelica realizes that Gaiath won't face Kelvin or Broston until the finals. She thinks they're going to make Gaiath seem strong by fighting against weak opponents, and when the odds against him are high, Snape will bet on his opponent and make a fortune by having him lose on purpose. But she plans on ruining their plan, since she's fighting him in the second round. Kelvin and the old man approach Broston and Rick, and the old man notes that Kelvin has the same look he had when he first came to his gym. We go back to when Kelvin joined the gym, and the old man tells him they have a fighter who reached the top 4 of the tournament. So Kelvin asks to fight him, thinking he can easily defeat him, but he ends up losing the fight. After tasting defeat for the first time, his attitude changes, and he starts to train hard, which leads to him becoming the Fist King champion. As the first match of the tournament begins, Gaiath's opponent starts to punch him, but it has no effect, and Gaiath defeats him in one blow. The audience is shocked by how strong he is, but Rick feels that something is weird, because even though Gaiath is strong, his movements are like an amateur's. The rest of the matches continue, with Rick and the others moving on to the next round, and in the last match of the first round, Kelvin faces a man named Eddie. As the match begins, Eddie goes on the offensive, but Kelvin immediately punches him, and Rick feels like Kelvin already knew how Eddie was going to move. Broston mentions that Kelvin has a great sense of smell, so he can sense changes in electric signals and adrenaline. Kelvin is suddenly knocked down by Eddie, but Renette notes that Kelvin let himself get hit on purpose, and as Eddie tries to attack once again, Kelvin pummels him to the ground, winning the match. The next day, Angelica's match against Gaiath is about to start, and Snape asks Rick if he can sit with him, which makes him wonder why he isn't sitting with the VIPs. But he explains that the match is between his brother and fiancé, so he needs to watch it up close. Meanwhile, Angelica approaches Gaiath before the match, telling him she's going to show him the results of her training. But he insults her because she's weaker than him, even though he has never trained and only plays around with his father's money. She thinks he's lying because it isn't possible to have his well-built physique without training, but he just says he will avoid hitting her stomach so she can still have his brother's children. As the match begins, Angelica hits Gaiath, but it has no effect on him, so she removes her strengthening magic, which surprises him. But as she attacks him once again, she manages to hit his body, making him bleed. Snape is shocked, because even the sharpest blade couldn't damage Gaiath's body. But Renette mentions that Angelica used a mana manipulation technique, and even though she didn't manage to learn it completely during their training, she kept training on her own. So by mixing it with mana reflex inversion, she managed to achieve it with her own spin. Miz explains it's a technique to temporarily store mana in one's body and instantaneously release more output than usual. It takes a toll on the body, but Angelica can use it easily after going through the hellish training for the past month. She continues to attack Gaiath, which makes him annoyed, so he punches the ground, causing the arena to be filled with dust. He tries to launch a surprise attack, but she manages to dodge it. He once again uses the same strategy, but instead of attacking from the front, he gets behind her and sends her flying into a wall. She uses her blink step, but she's shocked when she sees that he managed to learn it after just watching her, and he once again sends her flying. Snape tells Rick the first time he came across Gaiath was when he was trying to make a name for himself as a fighter, and Gaiath easily defeated him, which made him decide to retire. He knows they think he's fixing the matches, but he reveals that before the tournament started, no one thought a slot fighter would be able to win, so he put all his money on Gaiath. In the fight, Gaiath insults Angelica and her parents, and he keeps beating her to a pulp, but when she refuses to give up, it makes him want to kill her. As he prepares to finish her off, Rick throws his shoe at him, making his attack miss. After the match, Gaiath approaches Rick and tries to fight, but Rick tells him he will crush him in front of everyone. After Rick wins his match, he goes to check up on Angelica, and the nurses explain that her life isn't in danger, but she will need time to recover from her injuries. Meanwhile, Broston and Kelvin win their matches, and the final four of the tournament has been decided. The next day, Angelica apologizes to Rick because he wasted his time training her. She starts to cry, saying she only wanted to achieve her dreams, but she's starting to think she should accept Snape's proposal. Rick thinks he should be the one to apologize, because she did everything she could, and he was the one who couldn't see how strong Gaiath was. But he tells her to watch the next match, because he will show her what she can achieve. Before the match begins, Gaiath apologizes for not killing Angelica, which makes Rick angry. As the match starts, he punches Gaiath in the face, making him fall to his knees. Gaiath tries to punch Rick, but he dodges it, and he lands his own attack, making him spit blood, and Angelica is shocked by how strong Rick is. But Ronette reveals that he barely placed any strength into his attack, revealing that he used a chi attack, which damages the body from the inside, so no matter how strong Gaiath's body is, he would still get hurt. He uses strengthening magic and tries to attack Rick, so he starts to run away, but Gaiath catches up to him and knocks him down. Broston sees that the strengthening magic is consuming a lot of mana, and Snape notes that Gaiath never trained to increase it. So the mana they're seeing is what he was born with, which annoys Rick, because he struggled a lot due to his lack of mana. Rick lands another chi attack, but this time it has no effect, and Gaiath lands multiple attacks on him. Snape thinks the match is over, but Broston notes that Rick doesn't care how anyone else sees the match, and he only cares how Angelica sees it. Gaiath keeps attacking, but he starts to breathe heavily, and is shocked when he realizes that Rick hasn't taken any damage. Ronette mentions that Rick used a body manipulation technique, which disperses impacts into his body, so he's completely fine. Gaiath realizes that he's been holding back, and he notes that he's restraining his physical abilities to Angelica's level, so he can show her what her true potential is. Gaiath gets angry, and he covers his body in steel before he tries to attack Rick, but he shatters the armor with a chi attack. Rick notes that Gaiath's magic was a mess because he was too tired, and all of it happened because he has never felt tired in his life, so he doesn't know how to move when he's exhausted. Snape wonders if Rick is a greater prodigy than Gaiath, but everyone says he's talentless, and the only reason he's winning is because of how hard he has worked. Rick tells Gaiath he really is a prodigy, but true prodigies polish their skills, and Rick knows it because he has seen them up close. Gaiath becomes enraged, and he transforms into his dragon form. He starts to land hits on Rick, who tries to fight back, but he realizes that his attacks are working. He notes that the current Angelica can't defeat Gaiath, so he starts to increase his speed and power, which makes her realize he's showing her how strong she will be if she continues training for a year. Rick knocks him down, and tells him the only way for him to win is to struggle with his willpower, but he refuses to do it, so Rick decides to end the fight. Gaiath punches the ground to fill the arena with dust, but Rick uses the move that Angelica used. He manages to defeat Gaiath, but he feels like he still can't do the move correctly, because if it was Ronette, she would have cut him in half. Rick wins the match, and Angelica thanks him for his lessons, promising to become an even stronger fighter in the future. Snape admits that he's surprised by the outcome, but he mentions that a part of him wanted Gaiath to lose because he was the one who ended his career as a fighter. Snape notes that although he lost, he actually feels good, and he thinks it's a shame that he can't marry Angelica, who thinks he just wants to marry into nobility, but he tells her he really liked her. The next match is about to begin, as the old man tells Kelvin that he's the strongest fighter, telling him not to hold back during the fight. We see that his opponent is Broston, and the announcer introduces him as the champion, so the crowd goes wild, as Rick realizes that everyone loves him. The fight begins, and Kelvin starts pummeling Broston, who easily blocks his attacks, and he counters, creating a shockwave that impresses the crowd. Kelvin calls him the strongest opponent he has ever faced, but the wall suddenly shatters, as Gaiath appears, and he goes on a rampage, as Snape realizes that his dragon blood has gone berserk. Kelvin tells him not to interrupt their match, but he charges in, so Kelvin stops him and easily sends him flying. Everyone's surprised that he was able to defeat him in one hit, as Ronette realizes that he's at the level of an S ranker. The announcer apologizes for the incident, saying they will reschedule the match tomorrow, and Kelvin thinks it's a shame, because he was starting to enjoy the fight, but Broston can sense that he was holding back. Later that day, we see Rick going on a jogging trip, and he reaches the country's border, where he sees Kelvin training. He explains that he decided to train there, because he wants to be alone, but he thinks Rick's timing is perfect, because he's looking for a sparring partner. He suddenly attacks him, and Rick realizes he has no choice, so he decides to fight back, and he punches Kelvin, who manages to block it. Rick is impressed that he was able to react on time, asking him why he got hit by a slower attack at the tournament. So he explains that he loves fighting, and we learn that when he started joining the tournament, he defeated all of his opponents with a single blow. But he got tired of fighting, because his opponents were no match for him. But one day, he hears the old man talking to his business partner, who reveals that the audience is getting bored, because nobody stands a chance against Kelvin. He explains that it's bad for business, because fighting is going to lose popularity, and people will stop training in their gym. So Kelvin realizes that he's causing problems for the old man, and he decides to lose his next fight on purpose, realizing that it made the crowd excited. So he tries to entertain them during his matches, by pretending that he's having a hard time against his opponents. He tells Rick that he never fought using his full strength, but Rick mentions he won't need to hold back against Broston. The next day, everyone gathers to watch Kelvin's fight against Broston, as the announcer explains that the arena officials installed defense magic to protect the spectators. The fight begins, as Kelvin covers his arm with a wind vortex, and he starts attacking relentlessly, but Broston counters, forcing him to retreat. He knows that Kelvin is still holding back, knowing it's because of the audience, and he admits that it's true, saying he can't show his full power, or everyone will find out he's been deceiving them. So Broston decides to go easy on him, saying he will only use 2 fingers to fight back, and he won't move from where he's standing. Kelvin charges in, but Broston manages to grab him, and he slams him to the ground, but he manages to escape, and the crowd starts cheering for him, as he thinks about going all out, but he doesn't want everyone to see his full power. The old man calls him an idiot, telling him to stop holding back, and he reveals that his dream is to train the strongest fighter in the world, saying he wants Kelvin to become the strongest. So he decides to stop holding back, and he attacks Broston, who uses his whole hand to defend himself, as he explains that he's blocking with the appropriate level. Kelvin manages to land a kick, but it has no effect, and Broston throws him away. He uses his steel body before he crashes into the wall, and he mentions that he's having fun, but everyone starts to hate him, realizing he's been deceiving them. But he doesn't care, and he attacks with a 5th level fire spell, as Rick realizes that he's a force to be reckoned with, because he has just as much talent as his seniors. But Broston creates a stone wall to defend himself, and he shatters it to attack Kelvin, who manages to close the distance, and he uses a 7th level nature magic to restrain Broston. He follows it up with an 8th level advanced magic, and Angelica can't believe that an 8th level even exists, and it summons a massive meteor to fall from the sky, and Rick starts to panic, because Kelvin is so strong that Broston might stop holding back. Broston easily breaks free, and he just punches the meteor, and he completely shatters it, while Angelica can't believe he destroyed an 8th level spell with just brute strength. Broston mentions he can feel Kelvin's conviction to fight through his attack, and he decides to reciprocate it. Rick realizes that he's about to go on the offensive, and he attacks Kelvin with a shockwave, which blows him away, as everyone realizes that he's ridiculously strong. Kelvin uses every spell at his disposal to attack Broston, but it has no effect on him, and he runs out of mana. Broston dashes forward, and he lands a devastating blow, which knocks Kelvin down. Rick knows that he was able to use defensive magic to block it, but he realizes that he's in terrible condition, so he thinks about giving up. But he recalls that he always wanted to fight someone stronger than him, so he gets back up, and he unleashes a barrage, but he becomes exhausted, realizing he has reached his limit. But everyone starts cheering for him, so he gets fired up, and he combines all of his skills, as he attacks with everything he has. He manages to hit Broston, and everyone's amazed by his power, but Broston is still standing, asking him if he was able to unleash his full power. So he tells Broston that he didn't hold back, and he sees he was able to move Broston from his spot, saying he had the most fun in his life, and Broston delivers the finishing blow. After the fight, Rick and Angelica congratulate Broston, and Rick mentions that he just needs to withdraw from the match, and they can get the magic jewel. But Broston tells him he's looking forward to their fight, and he walks away, as Angelica realizes Rick is freaking out. We see Kelvin as he reads the newspaper, realizing that everyone hates him for deceiving them, and he asks the old man if he's okay with what's happening. So he explains that everything's going to be fine, asking Kelvin about his last move, but he explains that he was too absorbed in the moment, saying he doesn't remember how he did it. He thinks he has lost everything, asking the old man why he still hasn't abandoned him, but he tells Kelvin that he can still bounce back, saying he's like a son to him. Broston suddenly arrives, asking Kelvin about his injuries, and he explains that he's still in pain, so Broston offers to heal him. But he explains that he wants to experience the pain, telling Broston that he's looking forward to watching the final match. Meanwhile, Rick has locked himself in his room, and Angelica tells him to get out, but he refuses, saying he doesn't want to die. Snape tells him that everyone's excited to watch the finals, but he explains that he values his life, so he doesn't want to fight. But Snape starts singing, as he mentions that thousands of people worked hard to make the tournament possible, and countless fans are looking forward to watching the final match. But since Rick is too afraid to fight, so they have no choice but to abandon their dreams. So he starts to feel terrible, and Angelica reminds him that Broston can revive him if he dies, but he explains that death is a traumatic experience, telling her she'll never understand what it's like. She tells him she used to look up to him as her mentor, but she thinks she was wrong about him, and she walks away, as Ms. reveals that Broston decided to train him because he wanted to find someone who can match his fighting skills. We learn that orcs enjoy brawling with each other, but Broston is so strong that nobody stands a chance against him, so his dream is to find someone who can give him a good fight. Ms. tells Rick that he's free to withdraw, but he wants him to understand Broston's feelings, and Alice reminds him that Broston is looking forward to their battle. In a flashback to 2 years earlier, we see Ronette as she welcomes Rick to the Orichalcum Fist, and she introduces Broston as their leader. He shakes hands with Rick, and he immediately realizes that Rick has no talent whatsoever. So he wonders if he should just give up, but Broston tells him that he just needs to train harder than everyone else, asking him if he's ready to take on the hardest training of his life. Back in the present, Angelica mentions that Rick is pathetic, wondering if his training with Broston was really that extreme. So Ms. explains that Rick's training was insane, saying it's a miracle that he didn't lose his mind. She realizes that he must have struggled, since he was middle-aged and didn't have a skill. But Alice tells her that he has one, and Ms. explains that it takes a toll on his body, so Broston banned him from using it. We return to Rick, as he asks Ronette if she thinks he's lame, so she explains that she doesn't, saying she will always be there for him, but she thinks he should still fight Broston. The next day, the crowd gathers to watch the final match, but we see that Snape is worried, because the event will be ruined if Rick backs out. The announcer explains that the winner will be crowned as the champion, and he will receive $300 million as a cash prize. She adds that he will receive other rewards, including 2 tickets to the hot springs. And we see Rick preparing to enter the arena, but he's extremely nervous. So Ronette goes up to him and gives him some motivation. Broston and Rick enter the arena, and Rick tells Broston that he will fight with everything he has. The fight begins, as Rick attacks with incredible speed, and he manages to injure Broston. Snape wonders if he used magic, but Ronette explains they just exchanged 100 blows in an instant, and Rick was able to hit Broston with his slicing technique. He continues to attack, but Broston strikes back, so he counters with another slash. Angelica realizes that he's fired up, asking Ronette what she told him, so she reveals that she promised to join him in the hot springs if he wins. Angelica wonders if she plans on getting intimate with Rick, and when she says that she does, it makes her flustered, and she thinks they should just focus on the match. Broston decides to go on the offensive, and he launches a barrage of attacks, as Rick dodges all of them, but Broston suddenly appears beside him, and tries to finish him off. But he uses his basic air cushion to avoid the attack, and everyone's impressed that he can use it without chanting. He reveals that Ms. and Alice taught him how to do it, and he rushes forward, as Broston tries to blast him, but he jumps to the sky, and he counters with his air shot, but Broston manages to block it. Angelica realizes that a fight between S-rankers is on another level, and Broston tells Rick that he has gotten stronger, saying he's glad that Rick had the resolve to go through his training. He knows that Broston isn't just flattering him since he doesn't lie, so he mentions that it's an honor, but he thinks it isn't good enough because he wants Broston to treat him as his equal. He explains that he knows about Broston's dream because Miss told him the truth, so he wants to give Broston the fight he always wanted. He realizes that it's been 2 years since he met Rick, and he's now a full-fledged member of the party. So Broston thinks it's time to tell him about their past, and decides to tell him about why the Orichalcum Fist was created. We go back 46 years, and we see Broston when he was a child, but he realizes he's different from the other orcs. He would read books dropped by humans, and he eventually learned the language. The orcs would understand each other through fighting, but he was too strong to understand them. He went on to try and teach the other orcs to improve their lives, but he ended up being treated as their god, and there was no one who would approach him, so he ended up all alone. But there was a storm one day, and when he returned to the others, they were all already dead, but he didn't feel any sadness for them, and he realized just how alone he was. We see him reading by a fire when he's suddenly attacked by a man named Reinhardt, but he's surprised to see him reading a book. He also notices the wyvern next to him, and when Broston mentions he took it out, Reinhardt is surprised he can talk and apologizes for attacking him. Broston says he's used to it, and Reinhardt asks to learn more about him. So he tells Reinhardt his story, and he thinks it's a shame that he will never find someone he can fight with as an equal. Reinhardt asks him to try going after the dream he couldn't achieve instead, revealing he fought together with Yamato the hero. Broston remembers reading the book, and Reinhardt reveals that he was the one who wrote it, and Broston is surprised, because it was a story from 200 years ago. He knows he wants to go after the Kaiser, but Reinhardt thinks that by going after it, Broston may also find the strong people that he's looking for. So they end up starting the Orichalcum Fist, and he was soon able to meet people who were just as strong as him, but he notes that they have different strengths, and he's still looking for someone he can brawl with. So he creates his training plan, but Miss thinks it would be impossible for anyone to survive it, so he ended up giving up on it. But he thinks life is full of surprises, because it brought him Rick. Rick thinks about how Broston supervised his training every day for 2 years, realizing how much time he spent on him, so he wants to give Broston the brawl he's been looking for. Broston is moved seeing this, and they both start fighting with everything they have. Rick decides to throw away his fear, and they continue to exchange blows. Miz notices the barrier breaking, so he uses a divine magic to send everyone away. Kelvin wonders what he did, so he explains he had to send them away for their safety, as the barrier suddenly breaks. Snape can't believe what he's watching, and Rick shatters Broston's necklace. Angelica notes that Rick has landed more hits, but Broston's attacks have been stronger. Rick ends up getting blown away, but he refuses to give up. They continue to trade blows, and Broston finally enjoys himself, but he blows Rick away, destroying a huge part of the arena. As the dust clears, Rick wonders if he did enough to satisfy Broston, but he sees Broston is still chilling, so he knows he didn't do enough to be considered his equal and pay his debt to him, so he suddenly activates his skill. Broston is surprised to see this, and Alice reveals they secretly trained Rick to help him control his power. He goes beyond his limits, and he charges at Broston, who comes to the realization that he was always too focused on finding an equal to fight, that he didn't realize he had friends that cared so much and would go so far for him, so he's not alone anymore. He charges head-on at Rick, and they both reach their limits, so they both deliver their final attacks, causing a huge burst of light, and when the dust clears, we see Broston still standing, and Rick can't believe how strong he is, but Broston thanks him for helping him fulfill his dream, as he also falls over. When Rick wakes up, he sees Renette next to him, and Miz tells him he's been asleep for 3 days. He wonders why he has the belt, but Broston notes that although he won the match, Rick was the one who won the fight, and he thanks all of them for helping him with his dream. After that, they get the second jewel and replace it with a replica. Rick notes they are one step closer to the Kaiser, but he wonders about Reinhardt's age, since Yamato's legend was from 200 years ago, so Broston mentions that Reinhardt has an inherent skill that allows him to live a longer life. Rick wonders where he is now, thinking he's on a secret mission, but Broston mentions he's on the run because he forgot to return some books. After that, Snape tells Kelvin that Rick and Broston both declined the championship, so Kelvin is still the champion, but he doesn't think he deserves the belt. Golden Militia cry as Broston prepares to leave, and we see Rick and the others carrying souvenirs for their neighbors. But Broston is happy looking at them, since he's finally not alone. The group parts way with Angelica, but she notes she will be back, because she has asked Broston to train her. Rick thinks she's insane, but she declares she will catch up to him, and even surpass him, so he tells her he looks forward to it. He mentions he will run back to the castle for extra training, and when Angelica wonders how far it is, he mentions it's 3,000 kilometers away, so she thinks he's insane. He mentions he took 3 days to get there, and she thinks it's impossible, thinking it would take several months on a carriage, but Alice mentions they can buff the horse, and Miz uses his magic to make it completely jacked. As Rick prepares to leave, Renette mentions the trip to the hot spring, which makes him flustered as he imagines it, but he notes that he didn't win. Miz thinks that since their match was a draw, they should decide things by racing back to the castle. So if Rick wins, he will get to go to the hot springs, but if he loses, his training will be multiplied by 100. Alice starts the race, so Miz and Broston run off, while Rick is left devastated, but he tells Renette he will win, as he rushes off after the other two. We see them all heading back to the castle, and Rick thinks about how he was finally able to achieve his dream of becoming an adventurer, but he knows it's not the end, because it just means that his next dream is waiting for him. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.